Hello. I'd like to talk a little bit about intersectionality. I think it's a really important concept for our class. I just wanted to read this straight off here since I wrote it. Political and social events continue to ratify our nation's tolerance of racism, bigotry, xenophobia, and the abject disrespect for women. Yes, there's a name for that, misogyny. Dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women. The misogyny apocalypse. I like this. Turns out being white and male counted so much more than being intelligent or having grace or having decency. And it was unimaginable that America would self destruct rather than elect a female president. But that's what happened. But I'm not talking about recent events. I'm talking about a little while ago. 2008. America makes history. Obama wins, shattering a racial barrier, which was fabulous for him. It was fabulous. He was a great president. So that's not what I'm talking about. But we have a yes here and a no here. And I think it's so interesting. I came across this and it just really resonates for me. So while race became negotiable as of Obama's 2008 election, gender, no, questionably non-negotiable. And some of it can be tied back, it is considered, to the whole history, the beginnings of our nation. So, and part of that was the fight for the right to vote. So the only people that could vote the first time in a presidential election were voters that were white and landowners and over the age of 21. That was the requirement. A little bit later, well, kind of a lot later, really, 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed, and it was determined that all men, no matter what, could vote. I have to, of course, amend that it still took a really long time for non-white men to really easily vote. And I mean, I'm talking a really long time. Look at the Voters' Right Act and all the things happening in 1965. A long time. And there's still ways to block people of color voting. Let's not forget that. Okay, 1920, 19th Amendment passed, granting women the right to vote. Again, mostly white women did that very easily. So there are issues to be involved with that. But just kind of wanted to make a point that because white men got to vote first, men of color got to vote second, technically. It made a lot of sense that when a man and a woman were running for president, that no matter what, that we aren't going to break that gender barrier, right? So the 44th President Barack Obama symbolically represents progress for people of color. So, I mean, incredibly, yes. But he still upheld that particular gendered identity. So, misogyny? Yeah. Racism, maybe not so much in that case, but sure, because lower numbers and stuff. But definitely misogyny, the contempt for women. Malcolm X said way back in 1962 that the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. Let's move on. 2012. Obama elected, ran, did a great job. 2017, here we go again. Up for a new presidency, right? So we have Trump winning. So we have a yes. And we have a big fat no for Hillary. That gendered identity, right? So let's move on. 2021. Yes. No. I'm not talking about vice president here. No. No. Gender bias prevails. So as Dr. Crenzy has said, and lots of theories out there and academic evidence that gender is constructed by culture and society. So is gender bias constructed by culture and society. Kind of confusing to me that a majority of white women, 53%, voted for Trump the first time around. And so you're thinking, but they're women. The majority of white women voted for Trump, but wait a minute, aren't they women? Wouldn't they want to support another woman? And I loved this quote from this is a whole quote, so I'm just going to read it. A majority of white women, 53%, voted for Trump. This oft-repeated data point tends to disappear from coverage of the Women's March and the Me Too campaign. Instead, feel-good accounts of the resistance repeat a cheery narrative about women in pink hats as a fixed biological category of people who all experience the world in the same way and uniformly hold center-left political views. So that was by Daniels. That's 2018. So really like this part. A fixed biological category of women who all experience the world in the same way. Was that me? A feminist? I'm a feminist. Yeah, I believe in women. Yes. Had I been practicing mostly white feminism? Yeah, that was a real mind blower when Trump got in the first time for me. So, white feminism is a set of beliefs that allows for the exclusion of issues that specifically affect women of color. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all feminism where, we're all for one and one for all, but really it's kind of a middle-class white woman sensibility that everything is based on. And so, not saying that white feminists are evil people and trying to be malicious, but given privilege and stuff, it's hard for you to really look at all this clearly, and it's hard to move beyond the dominant culture model for sure. I mean, yeah. So in North America, our dominant culture is typically male, white, heterosexual, Christian, temporarily able-bodied, youthful, and has access to wealth and resources. So we're talking like middle class, upper middle class, upper middle class, though, right? So that's kind of just a standard general definition of the dominant culture. And so, although gender bias impacts all women, whiteness, for me as a woman, a white woman, provides a definite advantage for some. So then we look at the dominant culture. We say it's all that I said before, male and able-bodied and kind of rich and kind of all that. Women are in there as well. So, in the words of Patricia Hill Collins, white women are penalized by their gender but privileged by their race, which has been pretty handy, I think, for me. I've had a very safe life and had lots of practice being loved and feeling that I can say what I want to say. So when we look at there's considered to be 3 to 4 waves of feminism. Has it been centered around whiteness? And you gotta say, yeah, it has. So the first wave, the very first one, when they're really fighting for the right to vote and stuff, women of color like Sojourner Truth on the left, wow, she was just amazing, just really championing the right to vote, doing all sorts of amazing, famous speeches for it. So fighting right along those very well-known white women on the right, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. But people, white women kind of wanted to not have the issue of race coming in there, And so a lot of times there was closed doors and women of color weren't necessarily at those meetings, and literally sometimes some of the marches and stuff, like, get to the back, let's not be distracted, right? So that's pretty amazing, don't you think? And here's what I want to tell you. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, the ones on the right, fairly recently, it hasn't even been a decade, I don't think, had a statue, a proposed statue that is going to be in Washington D.C., where all the other stuff is. It was just them, and they did. So we're only talking not that long ago, and that after a lot of protesting, I mean, it's so crazy. Sojourner Truth was kind of yeah, added to that whole statute. So it doesn't go away. Okay, second wave of feminism, kind of same thing. Oh, not 1960 to 1900. That would be 1960 to like about, well, maybe about 1980 or so. There's different opinions on that. So, but really a lot like the first wave of feminism. The second wave was pretty much the gripes and concerns were more of middle class white women. Talking about, oh, I want to do more than stare at my clean kitchen floor. You know, Nonetheless, everyone else all other women were out in the workforce, and so they didn't have those kind of concerns. So it was pretty interesting. Um, Again, similar things happened, that there was tons of women of color fighting for really good causes during the second wave of feminism, and quite often they were not invited to the party, and considered. And I like, but black women often consider the white women were as much as the oppressor as white men. When you think, okay, 63% of white women voted for, yeah, so yeah, okay. Third wave, which is I don't know, like now, and there's different ideas about it, but the third wave of feminism is supposed to be kind of more like, yeah, let's include all women here, right? It stands out because we're supposed to learn from the past, learn from our racist past, and make sure that we're really folding everyone in, and that it's not just about white heterosexual feminism. It's more about looking at feminism and everything from an intersectional lens. And this was a concept that Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw really put together, actually a long time ago. But it's been a working concept that we can just use all the time. It's just so important. And so basically, Dr. Crenshaw basically started this out when she was a lawyer helping, trying to help black women get out of prison. And she kind of realized, like, wow, there's just something kind of amiss here. Like, there doesn't seem to be the kind of trajectory for women of color to get out of these situations as easily. So she was kind of saying that, yeah, we're not just talking about a gender problem here, right? We're talking about a race problem, and it could be other things as well. And a famous feminist, Audre Lorde, said there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives, right? So Crenshaw was saying way back in 1989 that the view that women experience oppression in varying, excuse me, intersectionality is the view that women experience oppression in different ways, in different kinds of degrees and configurations, and it's just different takes on stuff. That gender oppression is not just a singular thing, that there's other things going on, right, besides your gender. And so certainly your gender, your female gender, one strike against you for sure. But then if you add some other things, race, another strike, class, ability, all those things, then we're looking at a whole different picture. And that's what Dr. Crenshaw was trying to say. It's like, you can't just lump us all together. Like, there's certain things happening to certain women, and we need to have that recognized. And then Dr. Crenshaw added to her intersectionality theory in 2015. Said, like, okay, let's make sure that when we're looking at all these different intersections, all these levels of oppression, that certainly most foremost when she was doing her studies, I do want to add, is that she was looking at the impact of oppression on black women. So that was the basis, and then she moved it more to also, let's look at sexism. Class oppression and transphobia and ableism and class. I mean, all sorts of things. So she really kind of broadened the whole lens of intersectionality to really be applicable for all sorts of things. Again, with the basis of the impact for black women, particularly as the theory. So this one, so intersectionality shows us how some identities result in more privileges, more opportunities, right? So good example, for example, a white woman living with a disability will experience sexism and ableism, while a black woman living with disability will experience sexism, ableism, and racism. So they both have a disability. They're both women have disability, but a few other things some kind of impede your ability to move forward in the world, right? And so the really cool thing about that is that intersectionally really helps to have that you can kind of frame things differently. You can kind of look at stuff and you can see why it makes sense, why some things make sense, right? Right. Why some, and so I want to move to why this makes sense in some ways. Let's hop to 2024 presidential election, right? Oh, you're killing me. My heart is breaking even talking about it, right? I thought we're going to have this kind of do over. We're going to have something big's going to happen. And I don't know why I'm smiling about it because something big is happening, but it's not the kind of big I was interested in. So we've got misogyny there, right? We have misogyny because we're going to do that. The gendered identity that we're all familiar with, we're going to elect a male president. So we have the misogyny there for sure. No doubt about that. And we have the idea, we have the idea that the sexism, whatever, that if people of power, especially the president of the United States of America, is going to be male, right? It's going to be male. But if we look at it from an intersectional lens, there was this an added layer during this race, right? And that we're looking at misogyny, but we're looking at misogynoir, right? So we're looking at misogyny, but we're also looking at anti-black racism. So kind of double Dutch there for Kamala Harris in terms of really having a fight. Besides all the other factors, right? There was a lot of awfulness um, slung her way, right? So she has been attacked since she's been in and she's been in politics, right? Been governing and so also just a lot more happened when she was running for president, and so make no mistake, right? That a woman of power is going to get slammed, and a woman of power who is a woman of color is going to get slammed more, and that has been the case. And as much as I crossed my fingers and held my breath, oh, that's lovely. This is a lovely photo, as far as I'm concerned. Is that it just by looking at this from an intersectional lens and by looking at this from a gendered lens, it went exactly the way it was going to go. And why was I devastated? Why was I hopeful? And why was I a little bit surprised? So the cool thing about intersectionality that it demands that we deliberately look within ourselves at the places where we don't understand and where we feel challenged. So kind of cool. So the idea is that we can move forward, look at I can look at my privileges and help from an intersectional standpoint to really understand where other women are coming from, right? And so it's an important part because this class is about the impact of gender bias on females, and intersectionality really helps us just fine tune and really move up close and see some of the reasons why this is happening to particular groups of females, right? Mm. Yeah, that's right.